What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Trank. So I recently finished this little side table here along with a few other pieces of furniture, and all of them involve some sort of hardwood top that might expand and contract with the seasons, and so I needed to use a tabletop fastening method to keep them there appropriately. And I found that using a Festool Domino to quickly make mortises and then using shop-made button fasteners worked really well for me. So I'm going to quickly show you guys how you can do that. I think you'll find it useful with your projects, so let's go ahead and dive in. So obviously a Festool domino is typically used for floating mortise and tenon joinery. However, I found a really useful application of it is for creating mortises for attaching tabletops using shop-made button fasteners. So I'm going to go over how we do that today, but before we do, let's go ahead and talk about how these button fasteners work. Okay, so you can see here we've got the base flipped upside down on the tabletop here. I've already got the hole pre-drilled because I already installed these. But we've got our mortise here that we made with the domino. Here we've got our button that we made here. And if we go ahead and just slide this in here, you can see here that the button is free to move both side to side as well as in and out. And so that's why this actual slotted hole here is a little bit redundant. You could just have an oversized pilot hole. I just did it on this one, but you can see the button moves in and out and left and right, and that's what's going to allow us to move with the wood as the tabletop expands and contracts. So one of the things that's really important to get right with these buttons is grain direction. So if we go ahead and look at this button here, we can see that the grain here, and I've used red oak to really exemplify this, the grain here though is running right to left in terms of the piece here. And this is what we do not want to do, because what we're going to see is that when we put bending stress on this, as if something heavy went on the table or it took a fall, whatever, if this gets any stress, we're going to find that because the grain is running right to left on this button, that it's going to break super easily. What we want is for the grain to be running front to back on the button. You can see here on this one, the grain runs front to back. And what I'm going to do is put these in, and we're going to apply the same sort of stress to both, and we're going to see what happens. But it's really important that your grain is running front to back, not left to right on these buttons. So let's put it in and see what happens. Okay, so here we've got the button that is made the correct way with the grain running front to back on the button. What I'm going to go ahead and do here is just put it into our mortise as if we're holding up a table and just replicate. It's a little bit of an extreme example, but it's just to demonstrate here what would happen if we take a hammer. So if I take a hammer here, okay, so you can see there, before the actual fastener broke, we actually blew through the top of this poplar. Obviously, this mortise is a little close there, but that's just to show how this button stays completely intact. We actually blew through this before we blew through the button. So now let's show you what happens if we have the grain going the wrong way. That just sheared on the first blow we did with the hammer, and that is why it's super important you don't have the grain running left to right, because it's way easier to break those fibers in the longitudinal direction than it is to the transverse direction. So that's what happens if you do these buttons the wrong way. Okay, so it's important to note here that the domino only will make a set width slot, but if we want to make a wider one, it's no problem at all. We can just do 2 different passes, and I'll show you that here. It comes out super clean, and what I like about using the domino over a slot cutter or something different is that you get a nice thick tenon that you can use, so it makes it a lot stronger. So I'll go ahead and strike a line here and just show you how we can do 2 side-by-side passes to give us 1 long tenon or mortise. So we'll just pretend that this is the stretcher of our table, or maybe the leg or a connector between 2 legs, and that we need to put a spot for one of the button connectors. So we got our line here, and let's cut the mortise. Okay, so just to show that from another angle here, I'm going to show how when I actually cut this, instead of putting the center line here, I'm going to offset the domino in order to give us that extra wide mortise. So let's go ahead and cut it. So taking a look here, we can see the little black center line on the acrylic there, but instead of putting that on the center line of the pencil, I'm going to offset it to the left or the right. In this case, I'm going to the 15mm line. And when I do that, that's going to create the slot 15mm to the left of our center line. And then I'm going to switch it and do 15mm to the right. And then what that's going to give us is an extra wide mortise. So you can see here now you've got this nice long wide mortise, and I did that by instead of setting the center line on our pencil line here, I put the 10mm line on both the left and the right, and that gives us this nice big mortise. And so then we can take our button connector and go ahead and attach the tabletop. So just wanted to show how you can make these extra wide mortises with a Domino, no issues at all. So now I'm just going to go over how you can actually make these button fasteners yourself. I think that at the end of the day, they're much stronger and look better than, say, Z-clips or the figure 8 clips, and I think they really just function much better at the end of the day for furniture. So again, I was cross-cutting the poplar there, and then here I'm ripping it to width. You have to be, again, really careful about the grain direction because you need to make sure that those fibers are going the correct orientation so that you don't get a super weak fastener. But once I've got that, I can then bring it to the table saw and cut out the tenon portion. And I just do this by doing repeated rips at the table saw. And I'm careful here to creep up on the height. I don't want to overstep it and then have a loose fit in those mortises. I want this to be a really snug fit. And so I get it close at the table saw, and then I come here and you can see it's just a little too tight, and that's exactly where I want it. Because then with that I can use the hand plane or the block plane to bring it exactly into true. So now that I've got the overall height set, I just put a sit-up block or a stop block in the crosscut sled, and I can go ahead and cut out each of the individual buttons. So you can see they're really simple to make. It's not that hard and it doesn't take long at all. So again, here you can see that fits a little bit too tight, and that's exactly where we want it off the saw. I can then just take the block plane and bring them in a few thousandths at a time until I just get the perfect friction fit, because you want these to fit in there nice and snug, but not to be super loose or super tight. Then I can just drill an oversized hole here for the screw that's going to be going through. Again, you don't need a slot because these buttons can move left to right and in and out if you do this correctly, if you make them correctly. So just an oversized hole is going to be just fine. But then I can flip this onto the top. This is a hallway table I was doing recently. I'll have a build video coming soon. It turned out amazing. But now that I've got those, I can just go ahead and line up the button fasteners and get it centered, and then use a brad point bit to mark the holes. And then I can come through, drill those out, and get this top attached. But the same method and technique applies for whatever furniture you're doing. Just use that Domino to make a nice mortise, make these button fasteners, and it gives you a really strong tabletop fastening method. I then just use a screw and a washer to put it in, and that's good to go. Okay guys, so hopefully you found this video a bit helpful, a good tip for using your Domino to make those nice thick tenons for button top fasteners or tabletop fasteners. It's really easy to do, it's really convenient. You can use other methods, but this is just the method I prefer. If you own a Domino, it's a really good way to do it. And hopefully the little demonstration with the grain orientation helped cement why it's really important to get that straight. So if you enjoyed this content, guys, enjoyed this video, be sure to give my channel a subscription. I'd love to see you on future videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.